I was offered film and television for some time, and I just turned those down. I thought, you know, it's wonderful. You do that overnight. It's a big sensation, but then 2 years later, it's old news. And so what's happened is over 15 years, it's just steadily grown. And every child still thinks he or she is the first to discover it. And I like having the kids read and not turn to a DVD. I want them to have to work at reading to get the story. And I feel the musical requires that same use of imagination. It's ephemeral. You have to fill in the rest of the space, the room. You have to take a song and let it work on you. It's a part of a creative collaboration the way reading is. So the musical seems, you know, theater is as old as reading. It seems like part of that world and not part of the technological world that sometimes tends to take things away from children by doing too much creation without the child involved. I get distressed when I hear about toys that come with names and personalities and voices, and I prefer the school of thought where a child invents through the barest of material things. A wonderful passage in, I believe it's in Of Mules and Men by Zora Neale Hurston, is when she says her childhood best friends were a bar of soap and an old corn cob, and these elements that she would play with and give them names, and until the day came when they weren't there anymore because her adult self took over and they weren't magic anymore, these items. It's one of the most heartbreaking things I ever read, but the life she imbued those objects with and her own creativity is so rich, and kids just don't have as much chance to do that now. This sounds odd, and I've said it a number of times, so it might even now sound hackneyed coming from me, but I look forward to the day when an adult who read Magic Tree House says to a child or another person, I loved these books when I was little, and picks up one and then looks at it and goes, oh, this is so little. There's not that much here. There's just not that many words. And then they'll realize, oh, I was filling in all the blanks. You know, I was seeing 10 times more than she even gave me. So that was what was working on me all these years, was my own collaboration with the author. And I think that's the mystery of the printed word, that it's these little calligraphy we look at, and then it blossoms into this inner world. There's nothing that can replace that. So I feel like that's what authors are obliged to keep giving to children. And especially now that children can't play outside as freely as we could. They can't jump on their bikes and ride 2 miles away when they're 6 like we did. They can't go fish in streams. You know, my brothers would take off in the morning in the summer and come home at dinner when they were 7 and 8 years old. We had so much freedom. And we would invent all day long these lives. And children now are supervised every minute. They have play dates. They go to lessons if they're lucky, or otherwise they stay inside and watch television. So there's not that chance for developing a self that trusts itself and that gives itself boundaries and moral lessons through experience, and the thing that hatches you into an adult. It's being taken away right now. So I think reading is about the major source that replaces play the way we used to play. Originally, I was just going to do 4 Magic Tree House books, and I wanted to get back to my other writing, which I really enjoyed writing. I was writing a mystery series with bugs. I was working on a lot of retellings of folklore and fairy tales, and I was also working on a book on the religions of the world, which meant a lot to me based on my background of studying religion and traveling all over the East. So 4 Magic Tree House books, mass market paperback books, perhaps they'd make enough that I could support some of these other habits, you know, because they were going to go out in a much bigger way than the more what you call trade books that would end up more in libraries and small bookstores. So that was my intention in 1991, I think. And the 4 books came out, and suddenly something happened to me that had never happened before. I started getting letters from teachers and from kids and parents. And I'd never gotten letters like these before, where I thought these were my simplest work and not my most, artistic work. These letters were phenomenal in terms of how a kid learned to read on the books, or how a kid wanted more of the books. A child would send me their own Magic Treehouse story. All these interesting things started coming in. So when Random House said, would I do 4 more, I thought, well, just 4 more. It wouldn't hurt anybody. So I'm just going to jump in and do 4 more. And when those 8 were done, by the time they were done, I was traveling all over the country visiting schools. I just fell into this groove of wanting to be with kids and talk to them about the series. I was getting their ideas about where Jack and Annie should go. I would arrive at a school and they'd have all these projects for Magic Treehouse. They would have bulletin boards and stories and do little plays. None of this had ever happened before. So suddenly I just was caught up in the energy of that. And then Random House asked for 4 more books. We got up to 12 books. And about that time I said, there's a future here. This is so intoxicating to be part of the educational process. And teachers were playing a big role in inspiring me and in talking to each other and getting the books around. So at that point, we said, what would be the most educational way to continue this series? And we thought, well, what's happening is I'm taking a different subject with each book. Teachers and kids want to know more about each subject. What if we start a nonfiction line? And I think there was a name for this in education called paired selection. You take fiction and nonfiction and get kids to understand the relationship. So we had a perfect setup. So my husband Will took on that job because I was pretty busy with the fiction. And he's an excellent writer and a great researcher. And he started the Magic Treehouse research guides. And we did one on knights and castles and mummies and pyramids and the rainforest. And they started coming out as companions to my first books. And then we leapt over some subjects to do more curriculum-connected subjects. So teachers started playing even a bigger role. We got teacher advisors. Teachers started writing to us. We were writing back, asking their advice. We got several teachers as official advisors. And at that point, this became a serious educational tool. And so after Will had done, I think, 8, he was going to ask to do a Magic Treehouse planetarium show at Chapel Hill. And so he left to do that show, and then 2 more subsequently. And that's when we pulled my sister on board to take over the nonfiction line. So the Magic Treehouse research guides now are a big part of the whole program. There are about 17 of them out there. And Natalie and I tour with her books and my books. And this way, a child who's more of a nonfiction reader gets to come in from that angle. A child who's fiction, gets over to nonfiction through the fiction. And hopefully then, all children use this as a launching pad to go and read more about a subject of interest beyond our books. That's what we encourage in the nonfiction is you can do your own research, and you can go on the internet, you can go to a library, you can go to a museum, whatever. And we want children to be curious and to find that gaining knowledge is fun. We try to keep it fun by, encouraging their curiosity and their interest. And I think it's as fun for us, more fun now than it ever was. And I'm working on my 41st book. So somehow that whole thing of changing your subjects and opening yourself to the world is a real motivator for the writers as well as hopefully the readers.
For more author interviews, recommended reading lists, and information about teaching kids to read, please visit us online at www.readingrockets.org.